Take a look at a standard corporate calendar. A persistent misconception in human resources equates an entire performance management system with a single meeting at the end of the year. The annual appraisal is merely an administrative event. It is static, backward-looking, and dictated entirely by the HR department's scheduling requirements, rather than the daily operations of the business. True performance management is a continuous, strategy-driven process. The actual system is what stretches across the calendar in the intervening period. If an organization claims to actively manage performance, the validity of that claim is proven entirely by the managerial behaviors that occur within this 11-month void. This system operates inside an unequal employment relationship. At its base, this is an economic contract, where an employee exchanges effort for pay. But the contract is also psychological and social. It quietly dictates status, shapes professional identity, and establishes the unwritten expectations both sides hold but never formally signed. When these systems break down, employees often react defensively. Managers are quick to label this as a behavioral flaw or a lack of motivation. The reality is that these defensive reactions are the predictable result of structural failures in the system's architectural design. Ignoring the 11-month gap between appraisals does not create a neutral working environment. It actively degrades organizational output and erodes the trust required for the system to function at all. The most common structural flaw in corporate performance systems is forcing a single HR instrument to achieve completely conflicting organizational goals at the exact same time. A performance system can theoretically serve 6 distinct purposes. It can be strategic, administrative, informational, developmental, used for organizational maintenance, or documentational. The fatal collision occurs right here. The friction between the administrative purpose of allocating compensation and the developmental purpose of coaching employees to improve. You cannot ask an employee to honestly disclose their professional weaknesses for the sake of coaching in the exact same conversation that determines the size of their year-end bonus. We can observe the mechanics of this collision in a recent case study involving Merhaba Hospitality Group. Merhaba designed a system where a single December performance rating determined how the annual bonus pool was allocated, while also serving as the foundation for honest, vulnerable development plans. Within 2 review cycles, the data warped. 87% of the entire staff suddenly achieved ratings in the top 2 performance bands. The managers caused this inflation deliberately. They entirely abandoned difficult coaching conversations because an accurate developmental critique would financially penalize their own staff. The administrative pressure to distribute money efficiently cannibalized the developmental goal of actually improving workforce skills. The lesson is absolute. Once numerical ratings dictate financial outcomes, they cease to be objective measurements of performance. They immediately become negotiated settlements. This leads to the specific danger of data aggregation. Corporate systems frequently reduce complex, context-rich human performance into a single, context-free number. A case study from Sahar Logistics isolates exactly how dangerous it is to misinterpret identical low scores. This visualization shows 2 distinct dispatchers evaluated under the same system. Both received a failing 2 out of 5 score on their load accuracy metric. Look at the underlying cause for the first dispatcher. She had a simple knowledge gap. The company rolled out a new scanner workflow and never trained her on it. The second dispatcher knew the workflow perfectly. His failing score was the result of a systemic organizational overload, forcing him to cover 2 desks simultaneously. These identical numbers require drastically different managerial interventions. The first dispatcher needs an afternoon of basic training. The second requires a structural reallocation of the department's workload. A system designed solely to record the final numeric score is completely blind to these operational realities. When a performance instrument obscures the why behind a metric, it strips managers of the information they actually need to develop their people. Evaluating a system's viability requires a precise diagnostic framework. We have to separate the static architecture of the system from its dynamic daily operation. Look at this dashboard. On the left are design qualities. These are architectural traits built into the system from inception, like strategic congruence and inclusiveness. You either build them in or you never get them. On the right are use qualities. These are operational traits like specificity, meaningfulness, and validity that cannot be automated. They must be actively earned by managers during every single review cycle. Missing qualities do not announce themselves. They manifest as distinct, highly misunderstood organizational symptoms. When an entire department miraculously achieves 4 out of 5 ratings, management often assumes the team is excelling. In reality, the system lacks specificity. Nobody documented what average performance actually looks like, so raters default to high scores. When staff broadly reject an appraisal form's relevance to their actual daily work, the system lacks meaningfulness. The evaluation standards were drafted at headquarters without any input from line managers. If your highest performing teams are suddenly scoring poorly, the system lacks validity. The chosen metric is capturing something completely divorced from true performance. These missing qualities compound rapidly when an organization imposes forced ranking. At Nashira Retail, corporate policy required managers to place exactly 10% of their staff into a bottom tier, regardless of the store's actual output. The behavioral rot was immediate and devastating. Employees entirely stopped cooperating with each other just to avoid falling into that bottom 10%. Managers, trapped by the HR mandate, began artificially rotating the bottom rating among their staff year by year just to comply. When an architecture forces irrational compliance, the organization stops measuring true performance. It only measures the staff's ability to game the system. Performance management does not exist in a vacuum. It is the central intelligence engine that powers the entire human resources architecture. A corrupted core system, one relying on generic, uncalibrated traits, poisons the downstream data for every other department that relies on it. Any pay-for-performance scheme is totally indefensible if the underlying performance measure is structurally invalid. Workforce planning is similarly compromised. Restructuring decisions and succession plans become purely fictional without accurate internal capability benchmarks. Fixing these systems requires a specific structural trade-off. Organizations must physically separate administrative evaluations from developmental coaching. They require 2 distinct meetings, held at different times of the year. A functional system demands an investment of time up front to build in design qualities, rather than spending that exact same time cleaning up employee disputes at the back end. Even with the right architecture, use qualities are never permanently secured. They must be actively earned by managers over the course of every 11-month cycle. Designing a performance management system is not a soft administrative exercise. It is a rigorous act of behavioral engineering, where choosing to do nothing does active systemic harm.